Hello, and welcome to the TrailManners podcast. I'm your host, Eric Manning, coming to you from the beautiful trails in Ogden, Utah, but connecting you to wherever trail, ultra, and mountain running takes us. We'll bring trail running to life with amazing athletes, discuss the latest topics, epic journeys, and get you stoked for your next trail adventure. We're sharing the moments that make life special, because even a rough day on the trail beats a good day indoors, and nothing beats time spent with good friends and great stories. Catch us here weekly for your dose of dirt, vert, and good vibes. So now it's time to top off your water, grab some cheese curds, and join us for this week's podcast, where we take you deep into the heart of our sport. It's go time. Hello and welcome to episode number 301 of the TrailManners podcast. Our guest today is Abram Dickerson from Aspire Adventure Running. The TrailManners podcast is produced for your enjoyment, and show notes are found at TrailManners.com. Come back often, and please feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at TrailManners. And don't forget to subscribe, review, and rate us on iTunes. If you're so inclined, TrailManners would really appreciate any contribution via our Patreon account at patreon.com/TrailManners. All links are in the show notes. Now let's get after it. Well, hello and welcome back to another edition of the TrailManners podcast. As we mentioned, this is episode 301. And today we've got a fun guest on I'm super excited to get to know more about, honestly. It's Abram Dickerson. He is from Aspire Adventure Running out of the Northwest, and we're just going to go from there. So, Abram, thanks for taking the time virtually to jump on a podcast.
Yeah, Eric, good to meet you, and glad to be number 301.
Yeah, it's I think we did 298 and then took a year and a half off. So we're recharged and ready to go. So as I mentioned, this is virtual. I'm here in Ogden, Utah, and you are in Bellingham, Washington.
That's right.
My next place that I wouldn't mind living, I guess.
Yeah, I could do a lot worse.
Yeah.
There's plenty of good places in the world, and I'm just glad to be in one of them.
Yeah, right. So have you always been up in the Northwest?
I moved up here. It's been about 14, 15 years ago. I did grad school up at the University of British Columbia, and that's kind of what brought us up to the Pacific Northwest. And then before I was doing Aspire, I was teaching. So I was teaching at a small independent high school in Bellingham, and that kind of brought us back across the border from Vancouver, and then we've just kind of been loving life here ever since.
Nice. And so give us a little background about yourself, other than what it says necessarily on your website.
I guess the relevant stuff is I've always been in, kind of an outdoors oriented person. That kind of really began for me kind of back in high school. I grew up in Northern California in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, so in the Grass Valley, Nevada City area. So that's another great pocket of the universe. After high school, just did a lot of kind of backpacking, and that evolved into climbing and I don't know. So I've just always been kind of oriented around kind of getting outside. So that's kind of my little bit of, I know that's pretty vague, but general kind of orientation in life. I taught high school at this really radical kind of independent school that really focused on interdisciplinary studies. We did backpacking trips with students. We took our kids internationally and just really enjoyed kind of opening up the world for youth and kids. And that was sort of the incubator while I was kind of developing the Aspire project.
And how long ago did you launch Aspire?
We're starting our 7th year.
Wow.
So we've been at it for a little while.
And how did that start? I mean, you kind of mentioned a little bit that it came from like your youth background, but when did it click, to do it, and, what did it take to get it off the ground to get moving?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, like I said, I've always had a background in climbing, skiing, backcountry sort of activities. About 10 years ago, a friend of mine and I guess running was kind of like I ran, but it was never like the thing. It was kind of like part of training for other activities. And then about 10 years ago, a good friend of mine said, "Hey, let's go do this run in the North Cascades, the Copper Ridge Loop, which is a 34-mile loop, kind of a lollipop loop through some of the really spectacular trails in the North Cascades." And that was kind of I had a couple of kids at the time, and so running became this thing that like became the objective, right? Rather than like training. It was like, oh no, we're doing this, and so I've got to figure this thing out and unlock it. So that turned out to be something I just really enjoyed. I really enjoyed getting to know all the trails here in Bellingham and the North Cascades, and being able to just move really light and fast with just a vest, and it just opened up so much terrain. And I was able to kind of work that kind of lifestyle in and around kids and work. And so it was just really exciting. It was really hard.
Yeah.
Like, my first, ultra distance was this big mountain run that totally kicked my butt. But, but that just was like mind blowing, right? So it's like, wow, the map just started looking really different, instead of, routes that I had to carry a backpack to access. It would take, multiple days. It was like, oh, I can do that like in half a day now, or a day. And it just kind of changed the way the map looked. And so that sort of led to looking at the map in terms of like, okay, well, what else can we unlock that are in these wilderness spaces with, light vests? And then that quickly kind of resulted in like, well, we need car shuttles, and, we're starving afterwards. So let's make sure we've got food. And it just kind of like set the groundwork ultimately for what Aspire would become, is just like, oh, let's access these really remote, spectacular trails, but figure out all the logistics for folks.
Now, what was your first year look like? You're in year 7, and if people go to your website, which is aspireadventurerunning.com, there's a calendar with all these amazing things that you're putting on for people. What was year 1 like? Was it like 1 or 2 things? Was it more of a beta thing where you just got some people you knew and tested it out? How did that go forward?
Yeah, kind of a little of a hybrid of that. I mean, it started with getting, I was like, wow, we got a website. That's cool.
Step 1.
It's like, and then we got the permits. The kind of the first real permit that we landed that was like significant was with Mount Rainier National Park, and that allowed us to unlock the Wonderland Trail as a 3-day supported run. And the very first year, we got the permit for the Wonderland, and then the North Cascades gave us a permit, and they did it just because Rainier did it. Because, we said, hey, we want to do these running trips. They were like, we don't do that.
Well, these guys let us.
Yeah. And then like literally like the North Cascades National Park, like called Mount Rainier and was like, hey, did you get a permit request from these guys? What are they doing? And Rainier was like, oh yeah, we gave those guys a permit. They're basically hiking fast. And I was like, oh yeah, totally. That's what we're doing. And so our first trip was like, yeah, just some friends kind of in the North Cascades, just kind of playing with our systems. And then we did one trip, and we on the Wonderland, and we ended up breaking it into like 3 different weekends, just to kind of like, all right, let's just feel this out a little bit. We'll never do that again. It was a ridiculous amount of work to just, do it over 3 separate weekends. But
how would you do it differently then?
Oh, we do it all as one big push.
Yeah.
So we broke it up. You could do each leg over 3 weekends in a row.
Oh, gotcha.
And it was like, fighting Seattle traffic on Friday afternoon was just...
That was the longest part of the whole thing. Right?
Oh, it sucked, man. It was horrible. And,
how hard was it you kind of mentioned a little bit, but, I used to be a race director. I know a lot of race directors and the sport growing and everything. Was it hard to get these permits? When I look at what you're doing, I'm like, well, that's impressive that he's pulling these permits, really. Was that a difficult thing for you? Oh, looks like you're frozen. First technical issue here.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
I'll just keep Okay. Sweet. All right. You got me.
I gotcha.
Um, I don't know. I mean, without revealing all words,
Oh yeah.
I mean, fundamentally, we kind of like, or the way that Aspire orients is like guiding and outfitting for runners. So
Okay.
when we approached wilderness areas, like we said, hey, we're going to work with small groups in a guiding sort of an outfitting perspective. And so that was a language that I had in kind of applying for permits for our backpacking trips. And it was just kind of adapting it to meet the criteria of, small groups and leave no trace in wilderness ethics, but then just, oriented around the specific needs that runners have. So like we could never hold races where we're doing a lot of our trips, they just shut it down. But we've got a pretty robust set of like, risk management and safety protocols and staff training. And, so those all came to bear from my background guiding, backpacking and some climbing trips that it's like, okay, that was in my wheelhouse. And then it was just a matter of adapting it to the needs that runners have.
Now, did you ever, in the beginning, when you're going through all these processes, did you ever imagine 7 years later you would be where you're at now? Were you expecting to be further down the road? Or, I mean, like I said, looking at your site with all the events on your calendar or trips and classes, it seems to be a pretty big slate of things.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know. I think we're kind of, I don't know. It's like, I think we're kind of where I think we would be. I think we're kind of like, yeah, I mean, maybe we're kind of on par with where I would hope to be. I mean, it's been a learning curve for sure, but I don't know. I just feel fundamentally that, there's something just super special about the intersection of running and doing it in these remote places, right? It's just such a primal human sort of fundamental process, right? Mm-hmm. So, and the terrain that we get into is just phenomenal. And so then to pair that with the challenge of, running, and then to give people the support in terms of like, I mean, we're not guiding in a climbing sense or a ski guide sense, but we're just ensuring that like, hey, you're going to start well fed, you're going to finish well fed, there's going to be a safety net in the middle. You can just focus on that process of just moving each day, and people, they put it all out on the trail and they come into camp exhausted, and then it's like, oh, anything that I could ever want in terms of recovery is here, whether that's a hot shower or delicious food or the Theragun, or it's just like, wow, it's like it's here, it's like, man, this is great, and so they're exhausted, and then they get refueled and rested, and they're like ready to go again the next day. It's like, dang, like, this is dialed.
Well, let me, I'm going to have you walk us through one, right? Because I've always wanted to do the Wonderland. That's been on my list for 12 years easy.
Sure.
Known people that have done it, kind of unsupported or just, with a group of people or whatever. So when you're doing a trip like this, give me an idea when you talk about they come in with food. Do these groups, I'm guessing, are not too big of groups of individuals? You do say, a 28 to 30 mile day. Do you stay together? Do they finish and start at the same time? Is it at your own pace? How do you work through these? Because that's some of the, I think, questions I've talked to people, when I let them know you're going to be on the show is that route.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, the basic, the flow, we start our trips like the night before. We always kick off in the evening with people come together. We have a meal. We're camping out usually the night before, and we're really kind of laying out what to expect. So there's kind of that night where we kind of reorient. We check in with all of our. Well, we can even back up a little bit. So like, really, the process begins before people even show up.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a runner profile that everyone completes, and that really gives me information about people's fitness, about their training, about their backcountry experience, their familiarity with with just navigating in a backcountry terrain. So we've kind of done some vetting and making sure that people are like, okay, they haven't overshot their, what their capacity looks like. So that helps us have a really good sense of who we have coming on each trip beforehand. Each night before the trip starts, we check in with everyone, make sure they have their essential gear in their pack. We've gone over the route in detail. The GPX coordinates are available pre-trip. We've got printed maps that are available, and we've walked through what that next day is going to look like in terms of all of the terrain, the water sources, so they're set up really well prepared in terms of what to expect. Go to bed, wake up, have breakfast in the morning. It's usually an early start, so we've got the full day ahead of us. And then we start people, and we're not keeping people as a group. We expect people to spread out over that kind of a distance and over that kind of a time. And so part of that front end work of going over all of the intersections, the navigation, and that prep work allows us, gives us that confidence, okay, people know where their critical turns are. They have, their phone they can reference if they need to. And then they have the option, anyone can travel with our sweep. So we always have someone on our staff that has a kind of a in-reach texting device for emergencies, and they're always traveling in the sweep position. And then we've got 2 other staff generally on a trip that will then take all of the gear, our base camp, everyone's personal gear, and then load it up into our vans and then transport it to that next camp that people are running to. So while people are out there on the trail, there's a bunch of schlepping that's happening. And then we call those 2 folks basically our base camp person and then our super. They set up that base camp that everyone's running towards. And then one of those staff, we call them our super, they run the route from finish to start. So they're running from point B to point A.
Okay.
And we know we've got, let's say we've got 10 people that are on that particular trip, and they're looking for all 10 people, and they're essentially moving as a mobile aid station. They've got, a first aid kit, they've got extra calories, and they're there to kind of check in with everyone along the way until they get to the sweep. We've got everyone accounted for. And usually we're picking everybody up inside of the last 10 miles. We've kind of got everyone accounted for. And then we've got some policies and procedures in case we do lose someone.
Yeah.
We call it our oh shit pack.
Oh yeah.
If someone is just dragging and there's look, I'm just not finishing today, then, we've got a pack that has overnight gear that we run in to people. Yeah, so that's kind of how we do we call it our safety sandwich, essentially.
Nice. I like that, actually. That's a really good way of doing it, not just with the sweep, but you're accounting both directions, so that makes a lot of sense. Now, we'll stick with this Wonderland one. Are you thinking about 10 people per group? Is that generally the size, or has there been changes in 2020 because of the coronavirus? I mean, or management-wise, is that kind of where you like to be?
Yeah, so the wilderness areas, vary by state and jurisdiction, but, in Washington, a wilderness area group is limited 12 folks. So that looks like, for us, that's kind of our 2 staff and 10 runners, 10 clients, 10 customers.
Okay.
And we haven't changed that model for COVID because that's,
kind of the same route.
Pretty small realm groups we're kind of, operating in general. We do have some trips that we do that we call them kind of our rendezvous. We've kind of been talking about our stage style trips. We have some other trips that we do out of the North Cascades where we'll have a base camp, and rather than doing, moving a camp, people do a route and come back to that camp. And in those cases, we'll have 3 different groups of 10, so our base camp scene might look like 30 people, and it's a bit more festive, and there's just more social dynamics with 30 people. But those are the trips we've had to kind of limit our capacity on, for COVID.
So you've got your trips like a Wonderland Trail that's, 3 sections, you do them like this. Then you have this rendezvous, which is like you mentioned, a base camp, and then day runs from the base camp, and maybe a couple different routes for people. Is that how the rendezvous work?
Yeah, the rendezvous workout where you're getting all the perks of kind of the food and the kind of the great terrain, but you're coming back to the same camp. And then so like on all those trips, so you do a different run each day, and we just divide up the different groups. Like, oh, today we're gonna go do, we've got one in the North Cascades. We call it the Three Devils. So Diablo Lake, we're camped right on the shores of Diablo Lake, and then each day there's a different summit. So each day is a 14 to 20 mile day. Ruby Mountain, Desolation Peak, and then like Sourdough Ridge. You're getting some just spectacular views of the North Cascades, and then coming back to camp every night.
So what does camp look like? I just got done with a 30-mile leg. I come in to camp. What does that look like if I come and say like 5 p.m., 4 p.m., whatever it might look like? What am I expecting?
Well, there's probably a pretty good bonfire going. There's a first thing we're going to direct you to is going to be the cooler with all the beverages in it, so whether that's beer or kombucha or wine or, sparkling water, whatever you want. We actually ask people what their favorite post-run drink is, so we try and have that like in the cooler, just waiting for you. There'll be a charcuterie plate out, with like pickles and cheese and meats and chips, all those salty things that everyone you just feed me now.
It's the greatest cheese you've ever tasted in your life, right?
It's like, I'm just so done with my gels or bars or whatever you've been like eating all day. So we've got so there's like a nice, there's like this just immediate like calorie salt, replenishing stuff, that's there. And then we've got a couple of these, they're pretty familiar for most runners. It looks a lot kind of like an aid station initially. We've got these big 10 by 20 event tents. If the weather's poor, we've got sidewalls in them. We've got these big heaters. So, you can come out of the cold, wet rain and step into that. And it's like, oh man, now it's like 20 degrees warmer and everyone else is hanging out in a t-shirt,
So that's what you're sleeping. You're sleeping essentially in big tents. Is that kind of what it is?
Well, that's kind of our base camp scene. And then, folks can either bring their own tent and sleeping bag, or they can rent that gear from us.
Okay. So if you're traveling, flying in from somewhere, you don't have to take all your stuff with you if you don't want to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Really kind of what we're going for is like a smooth, basically someone should be able to show up with their running kit and like they could show up in their fitness and like everything else is dialed.
Nice.
So.
When you mentioned on the Wonderland, the night before going through, is there mandatory gear that you have to take with you, like some of these, big high profile races, or do you have just suggestions? Hey, make sure you bring this. How do you guys work that?
Yeah, we do the required gear, and and really, we flex it a little bit based on the forecast, but essentially that looks like a shell, a bivy sack, and a headlamp. Is like the bare minimum. Definitely, a hat and gloves. Just generally what I tell people is, like they should be prepared to like spend a night out and not die.
Okay. I like it. I like it.
So it's like, at the end of the day, like, if you for whatever reason you couldn't finish, like you should have everything, to spend the night out there. And, so that flexes depending on the season, like later in the fall, that looks like, okay, you should have a more significant insulative layer and you should probably have a pair of rain pants. And so we flex that based on the weather. But yeah, so that's how we kind of play that one. Like the gear you need to not die.
I like it. That's a new list I'm going to start and keep in my area here. The do not die list. Yeah. So you've got the stage, which is kind of the Wonderland Trail. You also have a Yosemite one. You have the rendezvous, which we just talked about, but you also have another one that actually I was excited, honestly, to see because there's some things I've wanted to do here, and those are skills, skills stuff. And so one of the ones I looked at that is the one that most intrigues me is like the Wilderness First Aid Skills course for trail runners, and I think that is amazing. I wish there was a lot more of those out there. As a trail runner, you're always pushing the limits. You're always pushing the boundaries. I run with a guy. We've run together for 10 plus years. And one day I just looked at him. I said, if you were to fall and get hurt right here, you'd probably be in trouble because I wouldn't know what to do. And he looked at me and kind of said the same thing. We're like, yeah, we do this a lot. And we're, it's not like we don't know what to do, but it would be interesting. So I like those. And those are ones how long have you been doing the skill ones?
Yeah, so those were new for last year.
Okay.
So we didn't actually run those in 2020 because of COVID. But it's been something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And so for a lot of the same reasons that you identified, right? I mean, a lot of runners, it's an interesting progression, for, how are people coming to this wilderness space, and if you come from a road background or a running background and you ran, maybe you ran roads or ran in college and then you started running trails and ultras and all of a sudden you're like getting drawn further and further into these remote spaces, you may or may not have that same, hiking, backpacking, kind of first aid, emergency sort of like wilderness background, that's kind of part of the climbing, hiking, backpacking culture. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're out there, right? I mean, runners are way out there, and generally we're like traveling super light, So we teamed up with an outfit, Backcountry Medical Guides, and they do all of the kind of the wilderness certification. So for that trip specifically, it's a partnership with them. They're a nonprofit that really focuses on, lots of different user groups. They do sport-specific medicine. So they have courses for mountain bikers and for folks that are sailing, like maritime. And so we approached them and said, hey, let's develop a curriculum for trail runners specifically. And John was really excited about that. They've got some trail runner docs that are on there, like doctors that are on their staff and consulted on it. So we basically collaborated on a curriculum that's essentially 70% just fundamental wilderness medicine, patient response, like fundamentals. And then 30% of the curriculum is really oriented towards like, hey, here are the types of scenarios and injuries you're going to see as a runner. And then we market it specifically to runners. So if you sign up for the Wilderness First Aid trip with us, you're going to be like out on Susha Island in the San Juans for 3 days, but you're going to be there with other runners who kind of all have the same kind of general interest and orientation as you. And so that influences the way that we do our scenarios and the way that we kind of set up the situations that people are practicing their skills.
I can imagine I would hope that it's a really well-received course. Because like you mentioned, you kind of keep pushing the limits. Obviously, you don't want anything to happen, but over the years, you always hear of incidents, from a race. I mean, we all in the sport. I mean, there's the Dave Mackeys and the people that just freak accidents. Some are life-threatening, obviously, which we hope they're not as many. But you always have the others, and it would be very interesting to see how many people would be able to take care of not just themselves, but if they were with somebody else. So when I saw this on your site, I was blown away. Not only the fact that you put them on, but where they're at was kind of like, again, if you're from the Northwest, maybe it's not as big a deal. But when you're from where, I'm from Utah, and I'm thinking, I've been in the San Juan Islands, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would hope I would have enough focus to pay attention and not daydream and gaze around what I'm doing. So you picked a pretty nice little spot for this.
Oh yeah, Susha is it's a very special spot. I mean, it's that's kind of that combo project with Backcountry Milk Guys is we bring our same kind of like food and support logistics sort of paradigm and pair it with the wilderness medicine and then situate that in a really fantastic spot. So.
And what does a day look like there? I mean, because you talk running, but it's obviously you're focused on wilderness first aid. Is there how long each day is the actual course compared to, hey, I'm going to get up early and run, or I'm going to run at lunch, or I'm going to run at, after the class? Is there plenty of time for people to get out for some little runs there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Susha is a pretty small island. There's about 15 miles worth of trail across the whole island, pretty moderate elevation gains, but it's just a series of beautiful coves and vistas, where there's wildlife and tide pools and just beaches. It's really a beautiful island. And so kind of the flow for that is, we charter a boat taxi to get there. There's no public ferry or service to get there. So you would kind of jump on this big boat that shuttles all of our gear out there. We set up our base camp. Pretty much the plan is to every morning and every evening have, run time available.
Gotcha.
Some of that, it'll be fairly unstructured, but it'll be really easy to make friends, like, hey, let's get up at, breakfast is at 7. So let's get up and be rolling by 6 and, catch the sunrise and,
wow.
and, be back for breakfast and then class, and then we'll break for lunch. And, the scenarios will be like, oh, well, let's run out to this point. And then like, the way the scenarios work is like, we'll embed someone in the group that like, fakes an injury.
Oh, like a murder mystery.
Yeah. So it's like we're out there and then all of a sudden it's like I trip and fall and like my ankle and this is happening. And like, it just kind of like happened, you didn't even like as if it happened on one of your regular runs.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then, oh man, we're like, 2 miles from camp right now. So how do we do this? And then it's a chance to practice those skills in a scenario situation that just kind of felt, as real as we can kind of make it feel.
Yeah, for sure, without having a real accident.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when I talked to you a little bit earlier, because like I said, I always wanted to do the Wonderland, and I was looking at the dates. You've absolutely got a lot of sold out stuff already. But I thought, man, and I think this is for people out there that, you're kind of unsure of the calendar in 2021. 2020 for races was pretty scarce. 2021, who knows? But I looked at it and I go, man, there's a Wonderland Trail trip in the end of August that would be a perfect training weekend for a 100-mile race in September, right? Mm-hmm. Do you see a lot of people coming to do those types of things at these as well?
Yeah, totally. That's super common. We get a lot of people training for Cascade Crest that'll come do an August trip. I think one of the coolest things about our trips, is who shows up for them.
Yeah.
And it really is an interesting group. You get folks that are kind of like what you're describing, who are really strong runners, who are just really excited about, who have a big race on their calendar, using it as a training block, and they just don't have to like think about any of the logistics.
Yeah.
And they don't really need us, but like, man, we just made that really easy.
Yeah.
And then we have other people for whom like this is like their goal, like this is their big project.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe they've only been running for a couple of years, but like they've trained up for it. And so the cross-pollination of experience and mentorship and support that happens it's really cool. It's really awesome to see that happen on the trip.
So do you see a lot of people like, wherever they come, say I come, it's like I bring me or 2 other people. Do you see a lot of that, or do you see a lot of like, hey, I'm just going to go by myself and leave with 9 new best friends?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's, we have folks literally coming from all across the country, to do it. And sometimes they come with friends, sometimes they come by themselves. It's definitely kind of a mixed bag for sure.
So just looking at the Wonderland for those out there, and some that may not even be familiar, it's like on the run itself, it's the first day's 34 miles, second day's 28, third day's 32. And that's some pretty, you have your elevation gain and descent, gain and loss, on each day. What would you suggest if I wanted to do this? What would you suggest? I mean, obviously, the better fit I am, the more enjoyable it's going to be. But is there some type of, you talk about finding out where they're at on their levels? If someone wanted to do this, what would you say? Hey, I want to come in August. I want to do the Wonderland. Where should I be fitness-wise?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd say one thing, this year we're doing a spring training community, so they could go onto our website, and we've got basically a training plan that would outline, mileage and some stretch and strength workouts they could do. We've got a coach that's going to be doing like monthly webinars, and to kind of like try to build some community around the people that are coming on the trips, and to kind of like, okay, like here's some specific space that we're creating to help people feel prepared and trained. So that's a resource. It's an interesting question in the sense that I think it really begins with a person's goal in the
Mhm.
sense that, like, how are they approaching this? Is this part of a larger training plan? Is this their goal race? Are they trying to finish for time? Are they trying to just finish? For example, like, you talk about the Wonderland mileage. So like day one from Longmire to Mowich is a 34-mile day. It's got right around 10,000 feet of climbing on it. So it's a big day by any standards. But I have people that finish it like in like 8.5, 9 hours. And, on average, it's usually between 10 and 12. 14 is not unreasonable. Like, I don't blink an eye at 14 hours that someone's out there. And like, I've had people out there for 17 hours,
Wow.
to get through day one. And so there's a real range in what it means to kind of do the Wonderland. And so while the overall mileage and elevation is big, I think your training really reflects what style you want to do it in terms of like, how hard you're going to push yourself.
Gotcha.
So
if you're looking at it as a training for 100, or if this is your big thing, or maybe it's your year-end celebration where you just go and enjoy yourself and take as many photos as you can, right?
Yeah. So it's like and all of those fit within our model, right? Like within that safety sandwich model. It's like, okay, like all of those three people, could do a trip with us on the same trip and all have a fantastic time. One will just relax longer in camp.
Yeah. I'll just relax longer on the trail.
And then someone else is going to relax on the trail. It's like, either way, they're going to have a great time.
And so your calendar, you start in May with your first aid class, and then you essentially go June, July, August, September as you have your stage, which we've talked about, Wonderland. There's a few other locations there. You've got your rendezvous and your skill. And then at the end of the year in October, you've got a backcountry woman's trip.
Yeah.
To kind of to finish that off. Have you done that one in the past as well?
Yeah, this will be about, I think, our fourth year with that one. I mean, this is an area that we've that we're kind of working on. We're putting some energy into it right now during our off season. One of the things that I've always felt really comfortable in the wilderness. It's been a pretty natural space for me, but I definitely recognize that there's kind of a dominant white male adventure narrative that kind of just gets perpetuated. And so there's so many strong female runners. And then there's a lot of female runners that there's some barriers to entry in terms of fear or skills or community, feeling like that's a safe place for them. So we have a women's specific trip. So that's all female staff, all female attendees. And that really tries to we try and position that as an opportunity for female runners who want to maybe that's the wilderness is more of an edge space for them, maybe they don't feel as comfortable, but creating a space, where hey, they can be supported by other female athletes who are out there doing that. So there's a little bit of a tease. We're going to be doing a women's adventure scholarship this year. We did it in 2019, kind of got derailed last year because of COVID, but that's definitely a space we want to do more is really support more, more diverse folks getting into the wilderness, including women.
How are you looking at 2021 right now? I mean, you have to have some type of model going in, being a business, coming off the heels of last year. I know the Northwest throughout 2020 was kind of that pocket of the red mark on the calendar or the map, so to say. Are you just kind of going at it?
Down in Seattle.
Yeah. Are you going at it kind of like you did in 2020? I mean, you had successful trips, so are you just going to plan just like you did in 2020 and hope for the best since you got it dialed in last year?
Yeah, I mean, how do I describe it? I sort of feel it as I'm optimistic, but I'm perpetually blending that with reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're kind of all doing that. The fact that we were able to operate in 2020, I think gives me a lot of confidence. Because in last year, everything was just there was so much uncertainty, and so much closure, and it's just redaction and retraction on so many levels. And so, we built a really I mean, it seems really kind of just like obvious now, but like when we were drafting our COVID protocols back in, March of last year, it felt like, an edge space, and like we were doing something unique in terms of like creating our safety protocols for COVID specifically. Now it's pretty common, the social distancing,
Yeah.
the wearing masks if we can't be, more than 6 feet apart. And so, yeah, so that, I don't know, I'm optimistic, but like if we do have to cancel anything, then, we have a system in place to kind of give people refunds or credits, and, whichever they prefer. And we'll just be like, we'll get it. That'll just be the reality of it. So.
And so if I'm a runner, if I want to do something like this, you hear it a lot, especially with races or any type of get-togethers. How comfortable or how confident should I be? Hey, I'm coming to the Wonderland thing, and I think, okay, Abram, do you guys have it dialed in? Do I feel safe? Give me some confidence. I mean, you feel comfortable letting people know, hey, we're doing everything in our way to make sure this is a safe and fun experience for you.
Are we talking about COVID specifically?
Yeah, Corona specific, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, with that, I mean, there's no way to eliminate risk in any wilderness activity.
Yeah.
All right. That was okay. I'm back on track.
We're good. We're good.
On that one. That was me forgetting to pick up my kids. and their teacher walking them home across the street. So that's what that was. Yeah. So COVID, people feeling safe.
Yeah, because you talk about people coming from different, parts of the country, right? And,
yeah.
There's some people that we've learned that are just more cautious than others or whatever their scale is. But from a standpoint of me wanting to do this, how do you give them confidence that everything's done that can be done to help them, barring their, common sense?
Yeah. Yeah. How do we do that? Well, I think it does lead, in all of my kind of language for that, like I definitely lead with like, hey, there's risk involved in any time you go into a wilderness and backcountry space, right? So there's going to be risk. And like COVID is the same way. Like we can know what the risks are and we can take steps to mitigate them, and that looks like following our protocols.
Mm-hmm.
If looking at our protocols, you're not comfortable, you're taking on that level of risk, then this is probably not the year for you to sign up for our trips. We'll be here next year. That being said, I think fundamentally, like being outdoors in small groups is one of the safest places we can be.
Yeah.
And there is something very, it was really powerful actually being out on the trail with people last year. It was like for a lot of people, this was like the one thing that they could do of all the things that they had on their calendar, and so we definitely spent some time like kind of, facilitating and even just kind of happening. Like we spent a lot of time talking about how appreciative we were to like be together in community. And okay, we've got masks on because we're sitting around in camp, but like we're together, and we're having this community experience that we've been cut off from, for months, at that point in time. So I think as people are kind of weighing that out, it's definitely an individual decision. We're not going to make any guarantees, that you're going to come away COVID free, but we'll be really clear about what our policies are. And then people can kind of weigh out like, hey, is this the right thing for me? So.
Did you have any cancellation trips last year? Not from people, but from Aspire. Did you guys have to cancel or postpone some stuff?
Yeah, we canceled everything in our early season. So all of May and June was canceled last year. So we didn't do any of we brought a couple things back, but like all of our trips to California, Yosemite, Lost Coast, all that was canceled. Our Susha first aid trip was canceled. And then, I worked really hard in collaboration with other guides and outfitters and race directors we have kind of a network here in a coalition. We had some contacts through Washington State with kind of the Secretary of Recreation. There's a person sort of in the state level that had kind of the ear with Governor Inslee. We had specific authorization from Washington State to operate under certain COVID policies, within the limits of our permitting. So, so we had a lot of support to get to return to operations last year, both kind of from the state and from the permitting, from the national parks. They all green lighted us based on our protocols that we submitted to them. Like, hey, this is how we're going to operate. And they reviewed those and said, okay, right.
Well, I can imagine. I was on a podcast as a guest a few weeks ago, and the question came up, and you kind of hit it right there, is trail running in general. People love to race, and I always question sometimes, do you like to race, or do you just like being a part of that community as well, like the finish line and being out on the trails with new people? And I think trail running is unique in some areas, but one of them for sure is just people love to be around other people. It's that community feel. So having that opportunity last year for people, it probably was, like you said, just kind of a silent moment of gratitude for them to be out, not just enjoying, what they love to do, but in a beautiful area. And just during a really, really tough time for anybody, being able to experience that. And I'd imagine that was kind of some of the things you were just talking about, right? When people were there just feeling that community spirit type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we kick off all of our trips with, we do a round of intros. We sit there and we kind of throw out a thought-provoking question, something kind of like, hey, this is who I am, where I'm from. This is something that's important to me. That question kind of has evolved over the years. But I mean, last year we kind of really focused on like, hey, what's something you've kind of come to really appreciate during this time?
Yeah.
And, it was really awesome and humbling to hear from people, who were in the middle of COVID, and we were all in the middle of COVID and coming together and having that human, like, hey, here we are, this has been hard, and acknowledging that, and here's some things we appreciate, and like, just that sigh of relief, like, wow, okay, let's get out on the trails and like, let's restore some like sanity and breathe deep and take in the views and be able to go at life again. Like that was a pretty special thing to be able to offer people.
It's a little bit of normalcy for them for just a moment. What was quote unquote normal, I guess, is kind of the thing. Sure. So on your trips that you have, do you have a specific trip or location that's your favorite? Because I'm serious. I'm not from that. I went to college in Portland. I lived up in the Northwest, but I'm looking at a lot of your locations, and then you can click on it, and then you can see photos, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I want to go there. And then I look at another one. No, I want to go there instead. Do you have a spot that holds something to you that you just, every time you're there, you're like, wow?
Man, well, yeah, man, that's like it's like asking if you have a favorite kid.
Exactly.
Like, which one's your favorite? Well, you just love them all for different reasons.
Oh, you can tell me off the air. I've got kids.
But I mean, I could tell you something absolutely uniquely special about every single one of them. Like if it's Yosemite, it's the immediacy of the granite. It is just so in your face. Lost Coast Trail it is remote and it is rugged, just expansive coastline collisions. If it's man, what else we got? If it's Susha, it's just the sunsets. It's just these incredible sunsets that are just beyond recognition. And then Goat Rocks, one of our new trips. Man, it's just volcano views. Like they're just so long and so deep and beautiful. And anyways, yeah, I mean, I could go through each trip and I could like pinpoint like, hey, here's something totally unique to that trip in that space. So,
well, and I don't know who did this for you guys, but I'm going to challenge anybody listening to go to aspireadventurerunning.com, and just on your homepage, you've got the greatest trail running homepage, period. The video, I'm sitting here watching the video and it just plays and plays. I could watch this before I go to bed. Unbelievable views. There's even some food shots in there, but there's some craters. I mean, I don't even know where some of these locations are. I mean, obviously there's mountainous stuff, but there's like craters, and you just seem, the person in the video seems so small. And
Yeah.
I've been into the San Juans. I live in Utah, so I've got some 13ers, in. But looking at some of these views, it is mind blowing. And I think, okay, if I do one of these trips, I better end up right where that guy's foot is, because that's where I want to see it. So, wow, this is like the greatest. Yeah, I got to find out what some of these places are on the video screen. So hats off to whoever
big
made
shout
that.
out to Nick Danielson with Nick Danielson Visuals. He's out of Seattle. He does fantastic work.
Oh yeah, it is absolutely breathtaking on some of these pictures. So do you guys usually sell out all your trips? I mean, like I said, I just went through, and even your Wonderland trips, you got like, I don't know, 5, 6, something like that, and almost all of them are sold out right now. There's a few spots on each. Are you guys used to just selling out pretty much all your trips?
Yeah, I would say, totally honestly, like it's taken a couple years to get that flywheel moving, like there's some of our trips where it took a couple years. They were kind of sparse.
Yeah.
People just didn't know. We didn't have that photography. We didn't have that, we didn't have like, I knew it was beautiful and I could tell you it was beautiful, but it's different to be able to like see it. And you're like, wait a sec, that's really good.
Yeah.
And so it's taken us some time to kind of capture that creative and really do that storytelling. We were looking, things were looking really good for us last year to kind of sell everything out. And then COVID happened. In terms of where we're at, like this year, like our Wonderlands have consistently sold out for sure. Some of our other stuff that just hasn't quite made it onto the radar, but this year we're not having that problem.
Yeah.
It seems like the cat's kind of out of the bag and
well, that's what I was hoping. And one of the great reasons to have you on the show is, like I said, in 2020 with race cancellations and sometimes like right up to the last minute, you get canceled. And again, hats off to every race director in the country for what everybody's had to go through. But what you've got, I've raced for a lot of years, never been a good racer, but I enter a race, but I've learned more, especially last year, to destination run, right? To take the stress off of drop bags and timing and splits and picking up a pacer and cutoffs and everything else. And I've been doing a lot more of these. Well, I want to run there. So I go and I find my own trails. So I think for me, this is like not that it hasn't been for sure, but it's like for me, this is like the next progression in a lot of people, right? Because you can still do it with your friends. I know some people say, well, it costs more than a race, but when you look at what you're providing, it's really not from a runner standpoint. I mean, I'm getting to run somewhere beautiful. It's 3 days of running in some beautiful spots in, say, Wonderland. Plus, I'm getting fed. Plus, I have a mobile aid station essentially. Someone watching. I mean, it's great. The question I have for you, I'm trying to get my girlfriend to come do Wonderland this year with me.
Okay.
So put her mind at ease. She's vegetarian. When we roll into an aid state or when we roll into base camp, there's vegetarian options, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of our key core staff, Kara, is vegan. No problem. Like we do, we've got meals that are totally set up for vegan, vegetarian, keto, like everything on the spectrum. Like we get it. I mean, runners are like we're runners too, right? We've been there on nutrition and like there's a range of how people kind of like dial in their nutrition, and we get it. And we've literally seen it all, from vegan, plant powered to, I am strict keto and that's it. It's like, that's part of that runner profile that everyone completes before they come out on the trip. And they dial in like, hey, here are my specific food preferences, food allergies. And it's like, that's like zero, that's no problem. Yeah.
Nice.
It'll all be delicious, for sure.
So if you go, like, again, I'm proud, I'm right here ready to click a button, but for your sold out stuff, how often does your wait list turn? Does that happen very often for you?
Yeah. So this year with the rendezvous trips, we've capped those down at, 12, if we get to a place in the world, where vaccines are being distributed in the fall and and we're feeling more confident about bringing, larger groups of people together, then all those trips will open up capacity on those. With the stage trips, because that's a set amount of group people covering a set distance every day, the weight, there's always some drops, but it's really hard to predict. It's like, oh, I got military orders and I got called overseas, or it's like I rolled an ankle training and there's just no way I can be like able to go do this. So that always happens, but it's less predictable for sure.
Gotcha.
It does happen, but it's tough to predict.
And then it says on the website, I'm sure as well, but if I'm looking at one of these trips, am I usually flying into Seattle? Is that what I'm doing for most of these, flying into Seattle and then finding my way to the rendezvous point or pickup point?
Yeah. So we, for California is a little different for sure. But with all of them, we've got a course packet. You can go to the website and request the course packet, and you just throw in your email, and then that will send off the course packet that gives you all that travel planning itinerary stuff. Each of the trips has a meetup spot, and if you get there, once you get there, you're golden. We'll take care of you. For the Wonderlands, we didn't do this last year, and we'll kind of see where it plays out this year. But in a quote unquote normal year, we do an airport shuttle pickup. So we can pick you up right at the airport and bring you right back when the trip's over. So, and all that's kind of laid out on a trip by trip basis, but fundamentally, there's a way to get to the meetup point and everything else is taken care of. Well,
I'm just going to encourage everybody for sure to check out the website, that those that aren't familiar with it, because it's just a great option. I love everything about it. Like you said, people are taken care of. You take the stress out of race weekend, you take the stress out of it. And you just show up with, like you said, ready to go, and it's all there for you. So what else do you have for people that are maybe not familiar with it that we haven't covered, to kind of kick them into that next level of, I'm gonna do this? Selling point for you.
Well, man, shoot. I don't know. I think the one thing I would say is, one of the things that's really important to us is like an ego-free community.
Yes.
That, when you get out there, we're not racing, and it's not about who's getting in there first or fastest. That's more important to some people and less important to others. With racing, there's only ever going to be 3 people on the podium. With us, like, it's just, there's not a podium. But I feel like we do an intentional job of kind of, creating that culture, but it's reflected in all the people that show up, and like, it's such a supportive group, and there's people who are like, I might be last, it's like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
That just means more time on the trail, and there's not judgment, and the folks that are there, they get how hard it is, putting in those miles, and they've all gone up those same hills. And, when people come in early, they're celebrated. When they come in the middle, they're celebrated. When they come in at the end, they're celebrated. And like, it's just a really supportive environment, for folks. So, when you pair it all together, the destination, the trails, the community, it really is a special experience. So.
Well, Abram, I appreciate you taking the time and not picking your kids up today from school to get on the podcast with us. That shows commitment, and I appreciate that. So when we go back to that question, what kid's your favorite? Apparently none of them are your favorite.
What kids? What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? I don't know who these guys are in my house. But no, I do. I appreciate you coming on. I really do hope that people are listening to look at this as an option. What places are left? I mean, like I said, I just pulled up the weekend I wanted to come, and there's 1 spot left. And like last week, there's like 6 or something. So it just gives you an idea.
We're in that space, yeah.
Yeah, what you're doing. But regardless, people, go check out the website, because just the video on the homepage will get your mouth watering for food and mountains, and some beautiful trail. But congratulations on what you've been doing there. I don't know what the future holds with maybe getting, with COVID and expanding and getting back into California's or moving other places. But I really hope what you're doing continues to grow, because I think there's almost a more need for something like this than there are more races popping up. And I know it's a lot of work for you guys, and your summers are booked, but what you do is fantastic. These skills things with the wilderness safety, even if you can't attend his, I just recommend looking into stuff like that if you do anything, not just running, but in the backcountry, just to be safe with the sheer numbers. Because it's not even about taking care of yourself, but if you come up on somebody that maybe is out there, which we might see more of with the conditions. So thank you so much again for taking the time to sit down and talk about what you're doing. And I really will share the Aspire Adventure Running website with everybody. And if you have any questions, they've got a great website. You can check them out, ask them questions, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer any questions for you. So,
yeah, if you land there on the website, feel free. There's a place to subscribe to our newsletter, and that's a great way to kind of just keep in the loop on what we're doing. So.
Yeah, and again, look at their spring training stuff. There's a bunch to look at on their website, but it is really cool what you're doing, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to have you on the show, and I wish you much success and luck in this coming year and whatever happens after that, and hopefully you'll see me at one of these pickup points.
All right, I look forward to it, Eric.
All right, thanks, Abram. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to the TrailManners podcast. I'd like to thank Abram Dickerson of Aspire Adventure Running for joining us today. You can check them out at aspireadventurerunning.com. I also want to encourage everybody to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at TrailManners, or swing by the website at trailmanners.com, check out our store page, and support the podcast by buying a shirt or whatever else we have in there. Or you can just hit us up on the contact page, let us know what you want to see, who you want to hear, or if you would like to be on the show. And if you could take just a moment to subscribe to the show and leave us a rating or review on iTunes or Facebook, I'd greatly appreciate it. And lastly, TrailManners would love your support via our Patreon account at patreon.com/TrailManners to keep us alive and kicking. Until next time, this is Eric Manning reminding you, you don't get what you wish for, you get what you work for. Now go get it.